Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel.
Betrayal and poison. The shocking truth behind Ned Quartermain's near-fatal collapse. The walls of General Hospital seemed to close in as Ned Quartermain fought for his life in the intensive care unit. What had appeared to be a routine cardiac episode at Bobby's Diner was far more sinister than anyone had initially believed. As the devoted family members gathered in the sterile hospital corridors, a shocking revelation emerged that would shake Port Charles to its core. Ned hadn't suffered a heart attack, he had been poisoned. And the man behind it, according to Ned himself, was none other than Drew Kane Quartermain, his own cousin. The collapse and the first fears. It all began on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when Ned collapsed outside Bobby's Diner, his body convulsing as onlookers rushed to his aid. M.A. Angio, to college students who happened to be nearby, immediately called for emergency services. Within minutes, Ned was transported to General Hospital, where concerned family members descended upon the facility, Olivia frantically searching for answers, Lulu trying to comfort his distraught wife, and Brooklyn arriving with nothing but questions in her eyes. The initial assessment suggested a severe cardiac event. Doctors ordered a battery of tests, and Ned remained unconscious for several tense hours as machines beeped rhythmically around him. Olivia sat vigil at his bedside, her hand never leaving his, whispering prayers and promises that he would wake up, that he would fight his way through this crisis just as he had weathered so many storms in Port Charles over the decades. "Come back to me," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Please, Ned, come back." The doctor's shocking discovery. It wasn't until the laboratory results came back that the true nature of Ned's condition became apparent. Dr. Portia Robinson, the hospital's astute and methodical chief of staff, reviewed the toxicology report with a grave expression. The evidence was unmistakable. Traces of a sophisticated poison circulated through Ned's bloodstream, not something naturally occurring, but deliberately administered. "The tests confirm it," Portia explained to Olivia and the assembled family members, her professional demeanor barely masking the gravity of the situation. "This wasn't a heart attack. Ned was poisoned. The toxin was designed to mimic cardiac symptoms, which is why we initially thought we were dealing with a myocardial infarction. But the molecular signature is synthetic. Someone deliberately contaminated something he ingested." Olivia's face went pale. Her hand instinctively moved to her chest as if the revelation had struck her physically. Who would do this? Ned doesn't have enemies like that. He's a businessman, a politician, yes, but he's not like some of the others in this town with blood feuds and vendettas. The family exchanged worried glances. In Port Charles, where danger lurked around every corner and secrets were currency, the question of who would poison someone wasn't always answered with obvious villains. But answers would come soon enough. Ned awakens with accusations. Hours later, as the sun began to set over Port Charles, Ned's eyes fluttered open. His body was weak, ravaged by the effects of the poison, but his mind was sharp, perhaps sharper than it had been in weeks. As consciousness returned, so did memory. The pieces of that day at Bobby's began to reassemble in his mind like a puzzle that had finally found its image. Olivia was there in an instant, her hand squeezing his gently. "Oh, thank God. Thank God you're awake. I was so scared." "Livy," Ned croaked, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had been inserted during his unconsciousness. "Something happened. I need to tell you. It wasn't an accident." "I know, darling. The doctors found poison in your system." "But who?" "Drew," Ned said, the name emerging with surprising conviction. "It was Drew. I know it. He poisoned me. Leave. He tried to kill me." The accusation hung in the air between them like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples that would spread outward to everyone in Port Charles. Olivia's expression shifted from relief to shock, her mind struggling to process what her husband was saying. "Are you certain?" she asked, though she knew Ned would never make such an accusation lightly. "How do you know it was Drew?" "I saw him," Ned explained, though the details were hazy, emerging from the fog of his poisoning and the medications coursing through his system. At Bobby's. He was there. He knew I would be there. And the food he could have easily, Ned's voice trailed off, exhaustion pulling at him, but his conviction remained unshaken. Olivia took in every word, processing the implications. Drew Charming, accomplished Drew, her husband's cousin who had been working so hard to position himself as a respectable politician and businessman. Could he really be capable of attempted murder? The investigation intensifies. News of Ned's accusation spread through the hospital like wildfire. It reached the ears of Port Charles Police Department officers within hours. Detective Dante Falconeri, who had been investigating various crimes in town, took particular interest in the case. By evening, officers were questioning everyone who had been at Bobby's on the day of Ned's collapse. Security footage was reviewed. Statements were documented. The machine of justice, though sometimes slow and imperfect in Port Charles, had begun to turn. Drew Cain was brought in for questioning within 24 hours. The congressman arrived at the police station with his characteristic confidence, though those close enough to observe him could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes flickered with something between concern and calculation. "I don't know what Ned's trying to pull," Drew said when confronted with the accusation, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of desperation. "I wasn't even at Bobby's that day. And I certainly didn't poison anyone. This is ridiculous. This is obviously some kind of conspiracy or a mistake." But the evidence seemed to contradict his denials. Witnesses placed him in the area around the time of Ned's collapse. Security footage showed him entering the establishment. And while there was no direct evidence linking him to the actual poisoning, the circumstantial case was compelling enough for the district attorney to move forward with charges. "Drew Cain, you're under arrest for attempted murder in the first degree," the officer announced, producing handcuffs despite Drew's protestations. "This is a travesty," Drew shouted as he was led away. "I didn't do this. Ned is lying, or someone has set me up." The doubt creeps in. Yet even as the charges were filed and Drew was processed into the system, questions lingered in the minds of those investigating the case. Drew's denials had been consistent and fervent, and in a town where deception was as common as the rain. Maintaining such steadfast conviction under pressure could mean either genuine innocence or a brilliant performance worthy of an Emmy nomination. In his hospital room, Ned remained convinced of Drew's guilt. But as days passed and the investigation continued, even he began to experience moments of doubt, fleeting instances where his memory of that day seemed to waver slightly, like a photograph beginning to fade in sunlight. Portia continued her medical oversight of Ned's recovery, monitoring his progress and the gradual elimination of the toxin from his system. She maintained her professional demeanor, though her mind, ever sharp and analytical, couldn't help but wonder about the true nature of what had occurred. The poison was unusual, sophisticated, requiring significant knowledge and resources to obtain. "The poison itself is fascinating from a medical perspective," she noted to her colleague, Dr. Jason Morgan. "It's not something you can simply order online or obtain through conventional criminal channels. Whoever did this had access to specialized knowledge and supplies." A family in turmoil. The accusation against Drew sent shockwaves through the Quartermain family. Brooke Lynn, Drew's own cousin, found herself in an agonizing position. She had always maintained complicated feelings toward Drew, especially given his recent descent into more morally questionable behavior as a politician. Yet she struggled with the idea that he might be capable of attempted murder. "I don't know what to believe," Brooke Lynn confessed to Chase during one of their private conversations. "Part of me can imagine Drew doing something terrible. He's been so ruthless lately. But poisoning Ned? Actually trying to kill him? That seems like a line he wouldn't cross." Chase, ever the dedicated police officer and the voice of reason, tried to present both sides of the situation. "The evidence is pretty compelling, but you're right to maintain some doubt. In this town, things are rarely what they seem on the surface. We need to let the investigation run its course and see where the evidence actually leads." The recovery continues. As days turned into weeks, Ned's recovery progressed steadily. The poison gradually left his system entirely, and his strength returned incrementally. Soon he was sitting up in bed, taking solid food, and his doctors began discussing discharge plans. Yet even as his physical condition improved, the emotional and familial wounds created by the poisoning and the subsequent accusations continued to fester. The case against Drew proceeded through the legal system with momentum, but questions continued to linger. The district attorney was confident enough in the circumstantial evidence to pursue conviction, yet the lack of direct evidence, no fingerprints on the poison container. No eyewitnesses to the actual act of poisoning left room for reasonable doubt. In his cell, Drew maintained his proclamations of innocence, though the reality of his situation began to wear on him. His legal team worked tirelessly to build a defense, investigating alternative theories and seeking to establish reasonable doubt about his presence at the scene or his knowledge of what had transpired. The uncertain future. As Ned prepared for discharge from General Hospital, he remained convinced of Drew's guilt, though the absolute certainty he had felt in those early days of recovery had begun to soften slightly. The incident had profoundly affected him not just physically, but emotionally and psychologically. Someone he knew, someone from his own family, had attempted to take his life. Or had they? That question would haunt Port Charles in the weeks to come, driving investigations, straining family relationships, and forcing residents to confront uncomfortable truths about the people they thought they knew. In a town where deception was woven into the very fabric of daily life, the poisoning of Ned Quartermain was just the beginning of a much larger story, one that would eventually reveal secrets darker and more twisted than anyone could have initially imagined. The case against Drew Kane would proceed to trial, the evidence would be presented, and ultimately, the truth, whatever it might be, would emerge. But in Port Charles, truth often came with a price, and justice was rarely as straightforward as it appeared on the surface. For now, Ned would recover, Drew would await his day in court, and the people of Port Charles would watch, wait, and wonder what really happened that day at Bobby's Diner. Next, the Port Charles Police Department finds itself navigating uncharted waters following the bombshell revelations that aired during the November 11, 2025 episode of General Hospital. The law enforcement agency that has been the backbone of this community's safety is experiencing a complete overhaul in its command structure, and the ripple effects are already being felt throughout the station's hallowed halls. Nathan's triumphant return to active duty. After what felt like an eternity of uncertainty and psychological evaluations, Detective Nathan West has finally reclaimed his position within the PCPD ranks. The decorated detective, whose journey back from his supposed demise has been nothing short of extraordinary, received the long-awaited phone call summoning him to the police commissioner's office. Walking through those familiar corridors, Nathan undoubtedly anticipated a straightforward meeting with Commissioner Anna Devane, the seasoned spy-turned law enforcement chief who had been steering the department with her characteristic blend of intelligence and intuition. However, fate had other plans entirely. Instead of Anna's knowing smile greeting him from behind that imposing desk, Nathan found himself face-to-face with someone far more familiar yet equally unexpected, Detective Dante Falconeri, his former partner and trusted colleague. The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Dante wasn't just filling in temporarily or handling administrative duties. He had assumed the role of acting police commissioner, a position thrust upon him due to Anna's sudden and mysterious departure for what was described as an urgent WSB mission. The World Security Bureau's unpredictable demands have once again pulled Anna away from Port Charles, leaving the PCPD in capable, but notably different hands. A partnership forged in complicated circumstances. Dante wasted no time in delivering the news Nathan had been desperately hoping to hear. The psychological evaluation that had been hanging over Nathan's head like a sword of Damocles had come back with flying colors perfect. In fact, Dante's words carried the weight of personal experience as he opened up about his own tumultuous journey. When Dante himself had returned to Port Charles after his harrowing ordeal and extended absence, he too had struggled with the psychological aftermath and the challenge of reintegrating into both his personal life and professional responsibilities. This shared understanding created a bridge between the two men, a recognition that trauma doesn't define a person's capability to serve and protect. With the authority now vested in him as acting commissioner, Dante exercised his newfound power to officially reinstate Nathan as a full detective within the PCPD. The badge that had been stripped away was now being returned, symbolizing not just professional rehabilitation, but personal vindication. However, as is often the case in Port Charles, good news rarely comes without complications attached. The chase factor, a partnership nobody predicted. The catch that accompanied Nathan's reinstatement was significant enough to give anyone pause. Rather than sliding back into his old partnership with Dante, the dynamic duo that had solved countless cases and built an almost telepathic understanding on the streets, Nathan would be paired with Detective Harrison Chase. This assignment carries layers of complexity that extend far beyond typical partner politics. Chase occupies a unique position in this narrative tapestry. When Nathan was presumed dead, when the entire Port Charles community mourned his loss and tried to move forward, it was Chase who stepped into the void left behind. He became Dante's new partner, filling shoes that many believed could never be filled. Now, with Nathan's miraculous return from the dead, Chase finds himself in an awkward position, no longer Dante's partner, but instead paired with the very man whose absence created his opportunity in the first place. The psychological dynamics of this arrangement promise to be fascinating to watch unfold. But the complications don't end there. Dante, in a moment of candor that speaks volumes about the murky waters ahead, issued a stark warning to his former partner. When it comes to the controversial and emotionally charged case involving Willow Corinthos, Chase's objectivity cannot be guaranteed. The implication is clear. Chase's personal connections and loyalties might cloud his professional judgment at the worst possible moment. For Nathan, this creates an impossible situation. How do you trust a partner when your superior has explicitly told you that trust might be misplaced? How do you work effectively alongside someone when you're constantly wondering if their personal agenda might undermine the investigation? Yankees versus Red Sox, a lighter note in serious times. Amidst all the heavy professional complications, there was at least one moment of levity that gave both Dante and Nathan a chance to connect over shared disdain. Chase, it turns out, is an unapologetic and hardcore Red Sox fan. For Nathan and Dante, both devoted Yankee supporters, this revelation prompted an immediate and instinctive eye-roll, a small but significant bonding moment between the former partners. In the grand scheme of murder investigations, conspiracy theories, and institutional politics, baseball rivalries might seem trivial. Yet these small human moments often reveal more about compatibility and potential friction points than any formal evaluation could predict. The Yankees-Red Sox divide has ended friendships, started arguments, and fueled decades of passionate debate. How will this rivalry play out when the three detectives find themselves working late nights on difficult cases? Willow's unexpected freedom and impending confrontation. While the PCPD reshuffles its deck, another explosive situation is developing on the home front. Willow Corinthos, who has been serving time at Pentonville Correctional Facility, has been unexpectedly released. Her sudden freedom raises immediate questions. What changed? What legal maneuvering or new evidence prompted her release? The answers to these questions will undoubtedly unfold in the coming days, but her return to Port Charles brings with it a powder keg of emotional volatility. According to spoilers for the November 12th episode, Willow's homecoming is anything but the joyous reunion one might hope for. Walking through the door of what should be her sanctuary, she's confronted with a scene that stops her cold. Her young son Wiley, sitting down to dinner with his father Michael Corinthos and a woman named Jacinda. For any mother who has been separated from her child due to incarceration, seeing them bonding with someone else in your absence would be heart-wrenching. But this situation carries additional layers of betrayal and concern that elevate it beyond typical parental anxiety. Jacinda isn't just any dinner companion or friendly neighbor. She's the escort whose actions had devastating consequences, specifically drugging Drew Kane, a respected member of the Port Charles community. The fact that Michael has allowed this woman anywhere near Wiley, that he's facilitating a friendship between his son and someone with such a questionable background. is certain to ignite Willow's protective maternal instincts. The confrontation brewing between Willow and Michael promises to be explosive, touching on themes of judgment, forgiveness, parental authority, and the question of who gets to decide what influences are appropriate for a child. The road ahead, uncertainty and intrigue. The question now facing General Hospital viewers is whether the Nathan and Chase partnership represents an inspired pairing that will bring fresh energy to PCPD investigations, or a disaster waiting to happen that will complicate cases and create internal strife. Nathan brings experience, instinct, and a personal investment in Port Charles that runs deep. Chase offers a different perspective, strong investigative skills, and connections throughout the community that Nathan lacks after his extended absence. Together, they could be formidable, or they could be a catastrophe. Only time will reveal whether these two detectives can overcome their complicated history, navigate Dante's warning about trust and loyalty, and forge a working relationship that serves Port Charles effectively. Meanwhile, Willow's return sets the stage for family drama that could reshape the Corinthos household dynamics in profound ways. What's your verdict on this unexpected partnership? Will Nathan and Chase prove that opposites can create investigative magic? Or are we watching the setup for Port Charles's most dysfunctional detective duo? Share your predictions below.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon. Bye.